My younger sister asked me to pretend to be her for one evening. At first, I thought she was joking. Then I saw her face. You just need to sit at the table for an hour, she said. That's all. I stared at her. Why would I pretend to be you? Because I can't go. Why? She looked away. I just can't. Her name was Natalie. She was 32, 3 years younger than me, and normally one of the most confident people I knew. That was why her behavior frightened me. We had been invited to a family dinner at our grandmother's old house. It wasn't an ordinary dinner. My grandmother had recently decided to gather everyone together because she wanted to discuss something important about the family. I had planned to skip it, but Natalie called me the afternoon before. Please, Mara. I had never heard her sound so desperate. What exactly am I supposed to do? Nothing. Sit where I tell you. Eat dinner. Don't talk too much. I laughed. You want me to impersonate you at a family dinner and you're telling me not to talk? I know it sounds crazy. It sounds completely insane. I'll explain afterward. Why can't you explain now? She went quiet. Then she said, because if I tell you now, you might not do it. That answer should have been enough for me to refuse. Instead, I agreed. Maybe because Natalie was my sister. Maybe because I could hear something in her voice that told me she was genuinely afraid. The next evening, she came to my apartment with a dress and a small box. Wear this. I opened the box. Inside was a thin gold necklace. I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to our mother. I looked at Natalie. Why are you giving me Mom's necklace? Because Grandma expects me to wear it. Then you wear it. I can't. Why? She didn't answer. Instead, she fixed the necklace around my neck. Whatever happens tonight, don't take it off. I stared at her. What is going on? She stepped back. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to tell me everything. Then she shook her head. Just trust me. The family dinner was held at my grandmother's house. About 14 people were there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen in years. Nobody seemed suspicious when I walked in. I kept my head down and tried to behave like Natalie. It wasn't difficult at first. She and I looked similar enough that distant relatives sometimes confused us. The dinner began normally. People talked about work. Someone complained about traffic. My uncle argued about the cost of groceries. I almost relaxed. Then Grandma entered the dining room. Her name was Beatrice. She was 81 and had always been sharp. She looked at me. Her eyes immediately went to the necklace. Then she smiled. Come here, sweetheart. I walked toward her. She touched the necklace. You finally wore it again. I smiled nervously. Yes. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. After all these years, I thought you'd never come back. I stared at her. I'm sorry. Grandma looked confused. What did you say? Before I could answer, an older man sitting at the end of the table suddenly stood up. His name was Arthur. He was my grandmother's older brother. He looked at me for several seconds. Then his face went completely pale. No. Everyone turned toward him. He pointed at me. You're not Natalie. My heart stopped. Nobody spoke. Arthur took a step closer. Who are you? I couldn't answer. Then he said a name. A name I had never heard before. Vivian. I frowned. Who is Vivian? Arthur's hands began to shake. You know exactly who Vivian is. I don't. He looked at Grandma. Then back at me. You have her necklace. I touched the gold chain. It's my mother's. Arthur shook his head. No. His voice became quieter. That necklace belonged to Vivian. I looked around the table. Everyone suddenly seemed uncomfortable. My aunt lowered her eyes. My cousin stopped eating. And Grandma was staring at me as if she had just seen someone who had been dead for decades. I finally understood something. Natalie hadn't asked me to take her place because she was afraid of the dinner. She had been afraid of someone recognizing me. I stood up. I think someone needs to explain what's happening. Nobody answered. Then Arthur looked directly at me and said, Your sister should never have brought you here. My heart began pounding. What does that mean? He took a breath. Because if you are really Vivian's daughter. He stopped. I waited. Then your mother wasn't the woman you grew up believing she was. The room went silent. I couldn't move. My mother's name was Sarah. I had photographs of her. I remembered her voice. I remembered her perfume. I remembered the day she died. There was no way she could be someone else. I looked at Grandma. Tell me he's wrong. She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly sat down. Then she whispered, Where is Natalie? I stared at her. She asked me to come in her place. Grandma's expression changed. Why? I don't know. Arthur looked toward the doorway. Then he said something that made everyone at the table freeze. Because Natalie finally found out who Vivian was. I felt the necklace against my skin. And suddenly, I wasn't sure whether my sister had asked me to attend that dinner to protect her secret, or to make sure I finally discovered mine. Nobody touched their food. The entire room had changed. 5 minutes earlier, everyone had been laughing and arguing over dinner. Now they were staring at me as if I had walked into the wrong family. I looked at Grandma. Who is Vivian? She closed her eyes. Arthur answered before she could. Someone your mother knew. That isn't what you said before. He looked uncomfortable. I said too much. You said my mother wasn't who I thought she was. Grandma finally spoke. Arthur, enough. No, I said. Not enough. My voice was shaking. My sister asked me to come here pretending to be her. Someone called me Vivian. Now you're telling me my mother had another identity. I deserve an explanation. Grandma looked at the necklace around my neck. That necklace was given to Sarah by Vivian. Who is Vivian? She hesitated. Your mother's closest friend. I stared at her. That doesn't explain anything. It was complicated. Everything tonight is complicated. Arthur pulled out a chair. Sit down. I'd rather stand. He sighed. 28 years ago, Vivian disappeared. I frowned. Disappeared. She left town. Why? That's what nobody could agree on. I looked at Grandma. And my mother knew where she went? Yes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were a child. I shook my head. That answer doesn't work anymore. Grandma looked down. Your mother promised Vivian she would never reveal what happened. What happened? Nobody answered. Then my Aunt Rebecca quietly said, Vivian had a daughter. I looked at her. Where is she? Rebecca swallowed. She died. When? 28 years ago. I felt confused. That doesn't make sense. Arthur looked at me. It does if you know the whole story. He reached into an old cabinet beside the dining room. After searching through several papers, he pulled out a photograph. He handed it to me. I looked at it. There were 2 young women standing together. One was my mother. The other was Vivian. They were smiling. I recognized my mother's face immediately. But Vivian looked strangely familiar too. Not like me. Like someone I had seen somewhere before. I turned the photograph over. There was a date. Then a handwritten sentence. The girls must never know the truth. I looked at Arthur. What girls? He didn't answer. I looked at Grandma. What girls? She whispered. You and Natalie. My stomach dropped. I looked at the photograph again. What does Natalie have to do with Vivian? Grandma stood up. Nothing. That isn't true. It was a long time ago. Then tell me. She looked at me. You were both born 3 months apart. I froze. Yes. So? Your mother wasn't pregnant with you. I couldn't breathe. What? Arthur stepped forward. Sarah adopted you. I shook my head. No. Grandma nodded. You were adopted. The room blurred. I sat down. My entire childhood suddenly felt like someone had removed a piece from the middle of it. You're saying Sarah wasn't my biological mother? Yes. Then who was? Nobody answered. I looked at the photograph. Vivian? Grandma shook her head. No. Then who? She looked toward the hallway. Your biological mother was Vivian's sister. I stared at her. But you said Vivian had a daughter. She did. Then where's her daughter? Grandma's eyes filled with tears. She was the baby everyone believed had died. I felt a chill. What does that mean? Arthur looked at me. It means the story your family has told for 28 years isn't true. I couldn't speak. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Natalie. Are you there? I typed back. Yes. What did you find out? The typing bubble appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, her reply arrived. Don't trust Grandma. I looked up. Grandma was watching me. I typed. Why? Natalie replied almost immediately. Because Vivian wasn't my secret. Another message appeared. She was yours. My hands began shaking. I looked at the necklace. Then at the photograph. Then at Grandma. Where is Natalie? Grandma's face changed. What did she tell you? I stood. She said Vivian was my secret. Arthur suddenly looked frightened. Did she tell you where she was going? No. Grandma grabbed my arm. Listen to me carefully. I pulled away. No. You listen to me. My voice broke. I came here because my sister asked me to pretend to be her. I thought I was helping her. I looked around the room. But now I think she sent me here because she wanted me to discover something. Grandma whispered. She shouldn't have. Why? Because once you know the truth, you become a target. I stared at her. Target for who? Nobody answered. Then the front door opened. Everyone turned. Natalie walked into the dining room. Her hair was wet from the rain. Her face was pale. And she was carrying an old brown folder. She looked at me. I was hoping you wouldn't find out this way. I stared at her. You knew. She nodded. For 6 months. 6 months. Yes. Then why did you send me here? Natalie looked at Grandma. Then Arthur. Then finally me. Because I found Vivian. I couldn't move. You found her. Natalie shook her head. No. She opened the folder. I found out what happened to her. She pulled out a newspaper clipping. I read the headline. Local woman vanishes after family dispute. Then I saw the photograph. Vivian. But beneath her photograph was another name. Evelyn Hart. I looked at Natalie. Why does she have 2 names? Natalie whispered. Because Vivian was never her real name. The room went silent. Then Natalie pulled out one final document. A birth certificate. My name was on it. But the name listed as my biological mother wasn't Vivian's sister. It wasn't Sarah. It was Vivian Hart. I looked at Natalie. She was crying. I told you not to trust Grandma. Grandma stood up. That's enough. Natalie shook her head. No. It's been enough for 28 years. She turned to me. You need to know what happened the night Vivian disappeared. I looked at the birth certificate again. Then Natalie said. Because you were there. I stared at Natalie. What do you mean I was there? She looked at the birth certificate in my hands. You were a baby. That doesn't explain anything. You were born 3 days before Vivian disappeared. I felt a cold wave move through me. That can't be right. Natalie nodded. I know. Then why is her name on my birth certificate? Because that's the part everyone changed. Grandma suddenly stood. Natalie, stop. No. Natalie turned toward her. You've kept this secret long enough. Grandma's face hardened. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. She looked at me. She wasn't adopted. I stared at her. What? Natalie opened the folder again. Your birth records were altered. Why? Because Vivian was your mother. I couldn't speak. The room seemed to shrink around me. But I grew up with Sarah. Yes. Sarah raised me. Yes. Then why would everyone pretend she was my mother? Natalie looked at Grandma. Because Vivian was supposed to disappear. I frowned. Supposed to? Natalie nodded. Vivian had discovered something about our family. What? She found out that someone had been using the family's business to hide money and property transfers. I looked at Arthur. He looked away. Who? Natalie didn't answer immediately. Then she said, Grandpa. My grandfather had died when I was 8. I barely remembered him. You're saying Grandpa was involved? Yes. Grandma shook her head. Your grandfather made mistakes. Mistakes? Natalie's voice rose. He threatened Vivian. Grandma looked at her. He was trying to protect the family. He was trying to protect himself. I looked between them. What did Vivian discover? Natalie pulled out another document. It was a list of properties. I looked at the pages. There were dozens of addresses. Some were businesses. Some were houses. Some were completely unfamiliar. What am I looking at? Properties that were transferred using false names. Why? Because the family wanted to keep ownership hidden. I looked at Grandma. Did my mother know? Sarah knew some of it. And Vivian knew all of it? Natalie nodded. She threatened to expose everything. What happened? 3 days after you were born, Vivian disappeared. I looked down at my hands. And I was given to Sarah? Yes. Why Sarah? Because she was the only person Vivian trusted. That hurt. Sarah had always told me she had wanted a child more than anything. She had never mentioned adoption. Never once. Did Sarah know Vivian was my mother? Natalie nodded. She knew. I closed my eyes. My childhood memories suddenly felt different. The way Sarah used to avoid certain questions. The locked drawer in her bedroom. The photographs that mysteriously disappeared after her death. Maybe none of those things had been accidents. I looked at Natalie. How did you find all this? She hesitated. 6 months ago, I found a box in Mom's storage unit. Our mother's. Yes. What was inside? Letters. From Vivian? Some. I held out my hand. Show me. Natalie gave me the first letter. The handwriting was old and slightly faded. It was addressed to Sarah. I read the first few lines. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back. Please don't tell her the truth until she's old enough to understand why I had to leave. My hands began shaking. She knew I would grow up? Yes. Then she wasn't planning to disappear forever. No. What happened? Natalie looked at Grandma. She was supposed to meet someone. Who? Arthur. I looked at him. He suddenly seemed much older. You knew Vivian? Yes. Where did she go that night? Arthur took a long breath. She came to this house. I looked around the dining room. This house. Yes. What happened? She wanted to take you with her. My heart stopped. She came for me? Yes. Then why didn't she? Arthur's eyes filled with regret. Because she never got the chance. The room became silent. What did you do? I wasn't here when it happened. Then who was? He looked at Grandma. She lowered her head. I stared at her. Grandma? She didn't answer. Were you here? Yes. Did you see Vivian? Yes. Did you stop her from taking me? No. Her voice was barely audible. She left you with Sarah because she believed you would be safer. I looked at her. Safer from who? Grandma's eyes filled with tears. Your grandfather. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted to take you away. Why? Because you were proof. Proof of what? Grandma looked toward the folder. Vivian had kept evidence that you were her daughter. I swallowed. And that evidence could have destroyed your grandfather. Natalie interrupted. There's more. She took out a small envelope. This was hidden inside the back cover of one of Mom's old books. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed Vivian holding me as a newborn. On the back was a handwritten sentence. If anything happens to me, tell her the truth. Underneath was a location. An address. I recognized it immediately. It was the same address where I had lived for the first 6 years of my childhood. I looked at Natalie. Why would Vivian leave this? She expected someone to find it. Who? Natalie shook her head. I don't know. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message appeared. You should stop looking for Vivian. Another message followed. She made the same mistake. I showed Natalie. Her face went pale. That's impossible. What? I've seen that number before. Where? In Vivian's letters. I stared at her. What does that mean? Natalie took the phone from my hand. She looked at the message again. Then she whispered. Someone has been monitoring our family for years. I looked toward the windows. For the first time that evening, I noticed a car parked across the street. Its headlights were off. Someone was sitting inside. I stood. Who is that? Nobody answered. The car suddenly started. It slowly drove away. Natalie grabbed my arm. Don't follow it. I wasn't going to. She looked at me. I think we need to leave. Why? Because if someone knows we found Vivian's documents. She didn't finish. A second message appeared on my phone. Ask your grandmother what happened to the original birth certificate. I turned toward Grandma. She looked terrified. Where is it? She didn't answer. Grandma. Finally, she whispered. I gave it to your mother. Sarah? Yes. Where is it now? Grandma's eyes filled with tears. Your mother didn't keep it. Then who did? She looked at Natalie. Then at me. Vivian took it. I froze. But Vivian disappeared 28 years ago. Grandma nodded. She did. Then how could she have taken it? Grandma looked directly into my eyes. Because she didn't disappear that night. I felt my heart stop. She came back. She's alive. The words barely came out of my mouth. Grandma nodded. She came back. When? 3 days after she disappeared. I stared at her. Then why did everyone say she was gone? Because Vivian wanted everyone to believe it. Why? To protect you. I shook my head. Everyone keeps saying they were protecting me. Grandma looked down. I know. But nobody protected me from the truth. She didn't answer. Natalie stepped closer. Grandma, where did Vivian go after she came back? Grandma hesitated. She came here. My stomach tightened. To this house? Yes. When? 28 years ago. And you saw her? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because she asked me not to. Why? Because someone was looking for her. Who? Grandma looked toward the window. Your grandfather. I felt a chill. But Grandpa was her father. Yes. Why would he be looking for his own daughter? Because Vivian had something he desperately wanted. The documents? No. Grandma's voice became quieter. You. I couldn't speak. What did I have? Your identity. I frowned. My identity? Vivian knew that if your real birth records were discovered, everything your grandfather had built could fall apart. Natalie opened the folder again. There was a second family involved. What family? The Harts. I looked at her. Vivian Hart? Yes. She wasn't really a Hart. Natalie shook her head. That was another identity. I felt exhausted. How many names did this woman have? 3 that we know of. And my mother? Sarah knew only one. I looked at the necklace around my neck. Then why did she give me this? Natalie stared at it. Because Vivian gave it to her. When? The night you were born. I touched the necklace. Why? Natalie took out another letter. This explains it. I opened it. The letter was addressed to Sarah. If I cannot come back, Raise her as your own. Don't let anyone tell her that she was unwanted. She was the only thing I ever fought for without fear. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time that night, I understood something. Vivian hadn't abandoned me. She had trusted another woman to raise me. But there was still one question. If Vivian came back 3 days later, why didn't she take me? Grandma answered. Because someone was waiting outside. Who? Your grandfather. What happened? He threatened her. With what? Your life. I felt sick. He threatened to hurt me? He said he would take you away and make sure you disappeared too. Natalie looked furious. So Vivian left again. Grandma nodded. She believed it was the only way. Where did she go? I don't know. But you saw her. Yes. When was the last time? 6 months ago. I froze. What? Grandma looked at me. Vivian came back 6 months ago. Natalie stared at her. You knew. I had no choice. You could have told me. I was trying to protect you. Natalie laughed bitterly. That's the same excuse everyone has used. I looked at Grandma. Where is she now? I don't know. Did she leave anything? Grandma hesitated. Then she walked toward an old wooden cabinet. She opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a small envelope. She handed it to me. Vivian left this for you. I stared at the envelope. My name was written on it. Not the name I had used my whole life. Another name. A name I had never seen before. To Elise. I looked at Grandma. Who is Elise? Grandma's face changed. That's your real name. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. My name isn't Mara? No. I looked at Natalie. She was crying. You knew. I found out 6 months ago. You knew my real name? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to find Vivian first. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Vivian was standing beside a little girl. The girl was about 6 years old. I looked closer. It was me. But there was something strange. The photograph had been taken after the date everyone claimed Vivian disappeared. On the back was a sentence. She knows the truth now. I turned the photograph over again. There was another date. It was from 6 months ago. I stared at Natalie. Someone took this recently. She nodded. That means Vivian is still watching me. No. Grandma shook her head. She isn't. I looked at her. Then who took it? Grandma didn't answer. A sound came from upstairs. A floorboard creaked. Everyone froze. Natalie whispered. Is someone here? Grandma slowly shook her head. No. Another sound. This time, a door closing. I looked at Natalie. Stay here. She grabbed my arm. Don't. But I was already walking toward the stairs. I reached the hallway. Nothing. Then I noticed something on the floor. A small black envelope. I picked it up. There was no name on it. Inside was a single photograph. Vivian. Standing outside a hospital. Beside her was a man I had never seen before. I turned the photograph over. There were 4 words written on the back. He raised you. My heart started pounding. Who raised me? I whispered. Then I noticed the man's face. I knew him. Not personally, but from somewhere. I had seen his photograph before. It was hanging in my mother's bedroom after she died. A photograph Sarah had always told me was an old family friend. His name was Gideon Vale. I ran downstairs. Grandma, who is Gideon Vale? Her face went completely white. Natalie looked at her. Grandma? She sat down. He was Vivian's husband. I stared at her. But Vivian never had a husband. Grandma shook her head. That is what we wanted everyone to believe. I looked at the photograph again. Gideon was holding a newborn baby. Me. I felt my hands go numb. Then Grandma whispered. Gideon wasn't just Vivian's husband. She looked directly at me. He was the person who originally took you from the hospital. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what Grandma had said. He took me from the hospital? Grandma nodded slowly. Not in the way you're thinking. How am I supposed to think about it? She looked at the photograph in my hand. Gideon was supposed to be the person who delivered you to Sarah. I stared at her. Delivered me? Your grandfather had arranged everything. My stomach tightened. Arranged what? Your new identity. I looked at Natalie. She was crying quietly. I knew some of this, she said. Some. I didn't know Gideon was involved. I turned back to Grandma. Why would my grandfather change my identity? Because Vivian refused to give you to him. So he took me anyway? No. Grandma shook her head. Vivian gave you away herself. I couldn't understand. Why? Because she believed you would be safer with Sarah. I looked at the photograph again. Then why was Gideon holding me? He helped arrange the transfer. I felt sick. Was I kidnapped? No. Then what was I? Grandma took a long breath. You were hidden. The word somehow hurt more. I had spent my entire life believing I belonged somewhere. Now I was discovering that my whole identity had been built around a secret. What happened to Vivian? She left after you were placed with Sarah. And Gideon? He disappeared too. Where? No one knows. Natalie suddenly stood. I do. I looked at her. You know where Gideon is? She nodded. I found his address. My heart started racing. Where? She opened her phone. About 2 hours from here. Then we go. Grandma immediately shook her head. No. I turned toward her. You've spent 28 years telling everyone what they can and can't know. I'm done listening. Mara. My name is Elise. The room became silent. It was the first time I had said the name aloud. It felt strange, but somehow familiar. Natalie gave me a small smile. Elise. I nodded. I need to know who I am. We left before Grandma could stop us. The drive was quiet. Natalie kept checking the address on her phone. After almost 2 hours, we arrived at a small coastal town. The house was at the end of a narrow road. There was no car outside. I knocked. Nothing. Natalie knocked again. Still nothing. Then I noticed the front door was slightly open. We looked at each other. Maybe we should leave, she whispered. I pushed the door open. The house was empty, but it didn't look abandoned. There were fresh flowers on the table. A cup of tea sat beside a chair. Someone had been there recently. We walked inside. The walls were covered with photographs. I stopped. There were photographs of me. As a baby. As a child. At school. At my graduation. At my wedding. My entire life was on those walls. I felt sick. Someone has been watching me. Natalie whispered. Not someone. I looked at her. Gideon? She nodded. On the desk was a handwritten note. My name was written on it. This time it said, Elise. I opened it. The message was short. You deserve the truth, but not from the people who taught you to fear it. Underneath was an address. A small cafe. And one sentence. Come alone. I looked at Natalie. No. She shook her head. You're not going alone. We went to the cafe together. An older man was sitting in the corner. He stood when he saw me. I recognized him immediately. Gideon. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he smiled. You look exactly like her. Vivian? Yes. I sat down. Why did you take me from the hospital? He shook his head. I didn't. Then why were you holding me? Because Vivian asked me to. Why? Because someone was trying to find you. Who? Your grandfather. I stared at him. Why? Because he believed you were his only weakness. I didn't understand. He was my grandfather. He wasn't protecting you. He wanted you to disappear. I looked at Natalie. Gideon continued. Your grandfather had been using the family business to move property and money under false names. Vivian found the records. And you helped her? Yes. Then why did everyone say you were part of it? Because I was. I frowned. I helped build some of the structures your grandfather used. My stomach tightened. Then why help Vivian? Because I realized what he was doing. Gideon looked down. I wanted to undo some of the damage. What happened to Vivian? He became quiet. She trusted me. And? I failed her. How? The night she disappeared, I was supposed to take her and you somewhere safe. But your grandfather found us. I felt my heart pounding. What happened? Vivian gave you to me. She gave me to you? Yes. She told me to take you to Sarah. Why Sarah? Because Sarah was the only person your grandfather wouldn't suspect. I looked at him. And Vivian? She stayed behind. Why? To make sure they followed her instead of us. I felt tears forming. She sacrificed herself. Gideon nodded. She saved you. I wiped my eyes. What happened after? I left town. And Vivian? I believed she had been caught. Was she? Gideon looked at me. No. My heart stopped. She escaped. I stared at him. Then where is she? I don't know. But you saw her again. Yes. When? 6 months ago. I looked at Natalie. The same time Grandma had claimed Vivian returned. Gideon reached into his coat. He pulled out a small envelope. This was given to me by Vivian. He handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Vivian was older. Much older. But it was clearly her. She was standing beside a man. I recognized him immediately. Grandpa. My grandfather. I stared at the photograph. He's alive. Gideon shook his head. No. Then when was this taken? 6 months ago. I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. Gideon looked at me. Your grandfather died 20 years ago. Then who is that? He pointed at the man beside Vivian. I looked closer. The face was almost identical. But it wasn't my grandfather. It was someone younger. Someone who had the same eyes. Gideon whispered. His brother. I froze. Grandpa had a brother? Yes. Who? Gideon looked at me. Your grandmother's first husband. I stared at him. That's impossible. Gideon shook his head. That's the secret your family has been protecting. Then my phone rang. Grandma. I answered. Her voice was shaking. Elise, come home immediately. What happened? It's Natalie. I looked at my sister. She was standing beside me. What about her? Grandma whispered. She never came here with you. I looked at Natalie. My blood ran cold. Grandma continued. Because Natalie disappeared 6 months ago. I slowly turned toward the woman sitting beside me. She was no longer crying. She was smiling. Then she whispered. Finally. I couldn't move. The woman sitting across from me looked exactly like Natalie. Same face. Same voice. Same little scar above her eyebrow. But Grandma had just told me that Natalie had disappeared 6 months ago. I slowly put my phone down. The woman smiled. You figured it out. My voice barely worked. Who are you? She leaned back in her chair. Someone who needed you to come here. Gideon stood immediately. Don't move. She looked at him. You're still protecting her after all these years? Gideon's expression hardened. You shouldn't have come. She smiled. I had to. I looked at her. Where's my sister? She is alive. Where? You'll see her. When? When you stop asking the wrong questions. I stood. Where is Natalie? The woman sighed. Your sister found the truth 6 months ago. What truth? That Vivian wasn't the only person who changed identities. My heart sank. What does that mean? She looked at Gideon. Tell her. Gideon didn't speak. Tell me. He finally said. Natalie discovered that someone had been using her identity. I frowned. Who? The woman across from me answered. Me. I stared at her. My sister's identity? Yes. But why? Because I needed access to your family. Who are you? She reached into her bag and placed an old photograph on the table. It showed a young woman standing beside Vivian. I recognized her from the documents. Her name was Maribel. I looked at Gideon. Who is she? He looked away. She was Vivian's sister. The woman smiled. I'm Maribel's daughter. I felt confused. Then why are you pretending to be Natalie? Because my mother was betrayed by this family. What happened to her? She was blamed for everything your grandfather did. I looked at the photograph again. Why did you come after me? I didn't come after you. She leaned forward. I came through you. I didn't understand. My mother left something behind. What? A set of records. What records? The original family records. Gideon stepped closer. Those records were destroyed. No. She smiled. Your grandfather thought he destroyed them. She pulled out a small key. This was hidden inside Vivian's necklace. I touched the necklace around my neck. My hands suddenly felt cold. What does the key open? A safety deposit box. Where? Your mother's old bank. I stared at her. Sarah's bank account had been closed after her death. At least, that's what I had always been told. How do you know? Natalie found the account. Then what happened to her? The woman looked down. She tried to open it. And? She was caught. By who? Someone from the family. I felt my stomach tighten. Grandma? She shook her head. No. Arthur? No. Then who? She looked directly at me. Your uncle. I remembered Arthur's fear at dinner. He was involved? He knew about the records. Gideon suddenly interrupted. Where is Natalie now? The woman smiled. She is safe. That isn't an answer. She is with Vivian. My heart stopped. Vivian is alive? Yes. Where? I'll take you. Gideon shook his head. No. She looked at him. You've spent decades deciding what is safe for Elise. I'm trying to keep her alive. She has a right to know her mother. I looked at Gideon. She's right. He closed his eyes. Then he nodded. We left the cafe. The woman drove ahead of us. Gideon drove with me. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, I asked, why did Vivian stay away from me? Because she believed someone would use you against her. Did she know where I was? Yes. Did she watch me grow up? Yes. I looked out the window. Why didn't she come to my wedding? She did. I turned toward him. What? She stood across the street. My eyes filled with tears. She saw me. Yes. And she just left? She believed it was safer. I looked down. All those years I had thought I wasn't important enough for my biological mother to come back. The truth was almost harder. She had been close enough to see my life. She just hadn't been able to enter it. We drove for another 40 minutes. Eventually, we reached a small farmhouse surrounded by trees. The woman stopped. She stepped out. Gideon looked at me. Are you ready? No. He nodded. Neither was Vivian. We walked toward the house. The door opened before we reached it. A woman stood there. Older. Her hair was completely gray, but her eyes were unmistakable. I had seen them in the photographs. Vivian. My mother. She looked at me. Her lips trembled. Elise. I couldn't move. She took one step toward me, then stopped. I've wanted to say your name for 28 years. I started crying. So why didn't you? She looked down. Because I was afraid that if I came back, you would lose everything. I already lost something. What? My chance to know you. She began crying too. I know. Then another voice came from inside. Mom? I froze. Natalie walked into the doorway. Alive. Tired. But alive. I ran to her. She hugged me tightly. I'm sorry. I held her. You could have told me. I tried. What happened? I found the records. And? I was followed. By who? Natalie looked toward Vivian. Then she whispered. Arthur. I froze. Arthur? She nodded. He wasn't protecting the family. He was protecting himself. Vivian stepped forward. Arthur knew the truth about your birth. What truth? She looked at me. The truth about why your grandfather wanted you hidden. I waited. Vivian took a breath. You weren't his weakness because you were my daughter. Then why? She looked at the necklace around my neck. Because your birth proved that he had betrayed his own family. I frowned. What does that mean? Vivian reached for my hand. Your grandfather wasn't the person who arranged your adoption. Then who was? She looked toward the woman who had been pretending to be Natalie. Her mother. I stared at her. Maribel. What did she do? Vivian's voice broke. She switched you with another baby. I couldn't breathe. Why? Because she believed you were in danger. I looked at Natalie. Then at Vivian. Then who is the baby everyone thought was me? Vivian whispered. That's the final secret. I stared at Vivian. What do you mean another baby? She took a slow breath. The baby Sarah brought home wasn't you. I felt as though the room had suddenly become too quiet. Then who was I? Vivian looked at me with tears in her eyes. You were the baby Maribel took from the hospital. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. It will. She sat down. Your grandfather discovered that I had given birth to you. He wanted control over your identity because he knew my existence could expose what he had been doing. So Maribel switched me? Yes. Why? Because she believed she could get you away from him. I looked at the woman who had been pretending to be Natalie. You're Maribel's daughter. She nodded. My name is Serena. I stared at her. Then why did you pretend to be my sister? Because Natalie was the person closest to you. I needed a way to get you here without alerting Arthur. I looked at Natalie. And you let her? Natalie nodded. I knew I couldn't get you to listen otherwise. I was angry. You could have told me. I tried. You told me nothing. Because Arthur was watching us. Vivian interrupted. Arthur has been protecting the family's secrets for years. I looked at her. What does he know about me? He knows that you aren't Sarah's biological daughter. I already know that. He also knows that your original birth records still exist. I remembered the key. The bank box. Vivian nodded. Inside are the records that prove everything. Then why hasn't anyone found them? Because only you can open the box. I looked at the key. Why me? Because the account was created under your original name. Elise? Vivian smiled sadly. Yes. I looked at Natalie. Then we need to get those records. She nodded. But Arthur knows about the box. Then we have to get there before him. Serena stepped forward. I know where it is. I looked at her. You do. My mother left me the information. Why didn't you open it? Because I don't have your identity. She looked at me. You're the only person who can legally claim it. The next morning, we went to the bank. Vivian stayed behind. She didn't want to risk being seen. Gideon came with us. Natalie and Serena followed in another car. The bank manager took us into a private office. I gave him the key. He examined it carefully. Then he asked for identification. I handed it over. He typed something into his computer. His expression changed. Miss Hart. Yes. I believe we have something for you. He disappeared into a back room. When he returned, he carried a small metal box. My hands were shaking. He placed it on the table. I opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, letters, and one sealed envelope. My name was written on it. For Elise, when she is finally old enough to know. I opened it. It was from Vivian. I read the first line. My daughter, if you are reading this, Then the people who tried to hide your identity have failed. I couldn't stop the tears. The letter explained everything. Maribel had discovered that Arthur and my grandfather were using the family business to control property and hide financial records. When Vivian became pregnant, they realized her child could eventually inherit information that would expose them. Maribel helped Vivian create a second identity for me. But the plan went wrong. The hospital records were changed. Sarah agreed to raise me. And another baby was brought into the family under a false identity. I stopped reading. I looked at Natalie. So who is that baby? Natalie took a breath. Arthur's daughter. I stared at her. What? She was placed with Sarah because Arthur wanted everyone to believe you were his granddaughter. I felt dizzy. That means. Natalie nodded. You and I aren't biological sisters. I looked at her. After everything we'd been through, that should have felt like another loss. Instead, Natalie took my hand. You're still my sister. I smiled through my tears. I know. Then I noticed something inside the box. A second envelope. This one wasn't from Vivian. It was addressed to Arthur. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. Arthur was standing beside my grandfather. And beside them was a much younger Gideon. On the back were 3 words. We made the deal. I looked at Gideon. He immediately looked away. You knew. He shook his head. Not all of it. You were involved. I was. I stood. You helped them. At the beginning. Then why did you help Vivian? Because I realized what they were doing. That doesn't erase it. No. He looked at me. It doesn't. Before I could say anything else, the bank manager rushed back into the room. There are 2 men asking for you downstairs. Who? He looked nervous. They didn't give their names. Natalie stood. Arthur. We moved toward the private exit. Then I heard a familiar voice from the hallway. There's no reason to run. Arthur. He walked into the office. But he wasn't alone. A man stood behind him. I recognized him from the photograph. My grandfather's brother. The man who had supposedly been dead for decades. Arthur smiled. You finally found the records. I held the envelope tightly. You knew about me. Of course. Why? Because your existence was the one thing that could destroy everything. I looked at him. Then why did you let me live? He smiled. Because sometimes the safest secret is the one nobody knows they're carrying. Natalie stepped beside me. You're not taking those records. Arthur looked at her. I don't need them. He looked at me. I only need you to make one mistake. What mistake? He smiled. Trusting the wrong person. Then Gideon stepped between us. Arthur's expression changed. Still playing hero? Gideon looked at him. No. He reached into his coat and placed his phone on the table. I've already sent copies of every document to the authorities. Arthur went completely still. You wouldn't. I already did. For the first time, Arthur looked afraid. Then his eyes moved toward me. You have no idea what you've just uncovered. I looked at the documents. Maybe not. I held Vivian's letter against my chest. But I'm finally ready to find out. Arthur was taken away later that afternoon. The investigation that followed uncovered far more than any of us expected. There were hidden accounts, false property records, old agreements, and evidence connecting several people to the scheme. But one question remained. Why had Maribel switched me with another baby? That answer came from Vivian. She told me that the other baby wasn't meant to replace me forever. It was meant to create confusion long enough for me to disappear. Maribel had believed that if everyone thought I was someone else, nobody would search for the real me. It had worked. Too well. I had grown up believing I was someone I wasn't. And Vivian had spent almost 3 decades believing that staying away from me was the only way to keep me alive. That evening, I returned to the farmhouse. Vivian was waiting outside. I walked toward her. I found the records. She nodded. I knew you would. I handed her the letter. You wrote this for me. Yes. You could have come back. She looked at me. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? She took my hand. Because I was afraid that one day you would hate me. I shook my head. I don't hate you. She started crying. I don't know how to be your daughter. You don't have to know. I smiled. We can learn. She pulled me into a hug. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was standing beside a stranger. I felt like I was finally standing beside someone who had been waiting for me. Then Vivian whispered something that made me pull away. There is still one thing I haven't told you. I looked at her. What? She pointed toward the road. A black car had stopped outside the farmhouse. A woman stepped out. She was holding an old photograph. Vivian's face went pale. That's Maribel. I stared at the woman. But Serena said her mother was dead. Vivian shook her head. No. She looked at me. Maribel has been alive all this time. For a moment, nobody moved. The woman standing beside the black car looked older than the photograph Serena had shown me, but there was no mistaking her. Maribel. The woman who had spent decades hidden behind other people's stories. Vivian walked toward her. Why are you here? Maribel looked at her. Because it is finally time. Serena stepped outside. Her face went completely pale. Mom? Maribel looked at her daughter. I'm sorry. Serena couldn't speak. I stood beside Vivian, trying to understand how the woman everyone believed was gone could suddenly be standing in front of us. Maribel looked at me. You're Elise. I nodded. She smiled sadly. You look exactly like Vivian. Why did you switch me at the hospital? Her expression changed. Because I was terrified. Of my grandfather? Yes. Did he know what you were doing? He suspected. Then why didn't he stop you? Because he thought the baby I took was you. I felt a chill. The other baby? Maribel nodded. I needed him to believe he had found you. I looked at Vivian. And what happened to that child? She was eventually returned to her biological family, Maribel said. She was never harmed. I felt relieved. Maribel continued. I never wanted anyone to lose their child. I only wanted you to survive. I asked the question that had followed me my entire life. Why didn't you come back? Maribel looked at Serena. Because I couldn't. She explained that after the switch, she was forced to disappear. Arthur had discovered enough to know someone had interfered with his plans. He spent years searching for her. She changed her name, moved from place to place, and eventually watched Serena grow up from a distance. I thought staying away was the only way to keep my daughter safe. Serena wiped her tears. You could have told me. I know. You let me believe you were dead. I know. Serena stepped forward. I spent my whole life thinking I had lost you. Maribel hugged her. I am sorry. I watched them for a moment. Then I realized something. Almost every adult in my life had made the same mistake. They believed that keeping the truth from someone was the same thing as protecting them. But secrets didn't disappear. They simply moved from one generation to another. That night, the 5 of us sat around Vivian's kitchen table. For the first time, the entire story was finally spoken aloud. No hidden names. No false identities. No pretending. Vivian told me about my biological father. His name was Samuel. He had died before I was born. He had never been involved in my grandfather's business. That was one reason my grandfather considered me a threat. I wasn't tied to the family business in the way he wanted. I was the child of 2 people who had refused to become part of his world. I asked Vivian why she had kept the necklace. She smiled. Because I wanted you to have something that belonged to me. Even if I never knew you? Especially then. I touched the gold chain. For the first time, it no longer felt like a mysterious family object. It felt like a piece of my own history. The investigation continued for months. Arthur eventually admitted to hiding records and manipulating several family accounts. The documents from the bank became crucial evidence. Gideon also admitted his own involvement in the early years. He accepted responsibility instead of trying to excuse it. Some family relationships ended. Others slowly began again. Grandma apologized to me. It wasn't a perfect apology. She cried. I cried. And there were things I still couldn't forgive immediately. But for the first time, she didn't tell me she had been keeping secrets for my protection. She simply said, I was wrong. That meant more than she probably realized. Natalie remained my sister. Not by blood. Not by genetics. But by 30 years of memories. We laughed about how absurd it was that we'd spent our entire childhood sharing a room, arguing over clothes, and blaming each other for things we hadn't done only to discover that we weren't biologically related. One evening she said, So technically, I can finally stop calling you my annoying sister. I laughed. You're still stuck with me. She smiled. Good. Months later, Vivian and I started building a relationship. It wasn't easy. There were awkward moments. There were questions neither of us knew how to answer. Sometimes I was angry. Sometimes she was guilty. Sometimes we simply sat together without saying anything. But gradually, she became part of my life. Not the mother who raised me. Not a replacement for Sarah. Something different. Something I had never had before. A chance to know where I came from. I still kept Sarah's photographs. She had raised me. She had loved me. She had been given an impossible responsibility and carried it for years. Knowing the truth didn't erase that. It simply gave me another piece of the story. One afternoon, I visited her grave. I placed flowers beside her name. Then I touched the necklace around my neck. I know now, I whispered. I finally know. I told her about Vivian. About Natalie. About everything that had happened. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was betraying one mother by loving another. I realized I didn't have to choose. I could be grateful for the woman who raised me, and grateful for the woman who fought to keep me alive. Both could be true. A few weeks later, Vivian invited everyone to dinner. Grandma came. Natalie came. Serena came with Maribel. Even Gideon joined us. We sat around one table. The same kind of family dinner that had started everything. But this time, nobody was pretending. Before dinner, Vivian handed me a small wooden box. Inside was an old photograph. It showed her holding me as a newborn. On the back was a message. One day, she will know who she is. I smiled through my tears. For most of my life, I thought identity was something written on a birth certificate. A name. A date. A place. Now I understood that it was much more than that. My name had changed. My family history had changed. Even the story of my birth had changed. But I hadn't. I was still the same person who had grown up loving Sarah. The same sister who would always choose Natalie. The same woman who had spent one strange evening pretending to be someone else and accidentally discovered who she really was. I looked around the table. So many secrets had brought us there. But honesty was what finally kept us together. And when Vivian reached across the table and took my hand, I didn't hesitate. I held hers. I had spent years believing my family had hidden the truth because I wasn't strong enough to handle it. The truth was different. I had always been strong enough. They were simply afraid of what would happen when I finally knew. And maybe that was the biggest lesson of all. A secret can protect someone for a day, sometimes for a year. But eventually, the truth finds a way home. And when it does, you have to decide whether you're going to let it destroy your family, or finally give everyone a chance to rebuild it. If you discovered that the family you grew up with had hidden your real identity to protect you, would you forgive them and try to rebuild the relationship?